There's a moment in every man's awakening when the world suddenly feels different, not because the world has changed, but because he has. And in that moment, something ancient within him stirs. The Taoists called it returning to the way. The sages knew it as seeing clearly. But whatever you call it, one thing becomes undeniable. He can no longer walk where everyone else walks, not because he's better, but because he's awake. And the awake man walks alone. When this awakening begins, he doesn't announce it. There's no declaration, no grand exit from society. He simply notices that most conversations have become hollow. People gather to complain about their circumstances, yet they never change them. They speak of their dreams while reinforcing the very patterns that keep those dreams impossible. They seek connection while wearing masks so thick that real meeting becomes impossible. He used to participate in this dance. He used to think this was what human relationship meant. But now, standing in the middle of these exchanges, he feels like a stranger in a familiar land. The ancient text, Tao Te Ching, teaches us, the sage does not accumulate. The more he assists others, the more he possesses. The more he gives to others, the more he gains. This is the paradox he now lives. By stepping back from the performance, he gains his authentic self. By releasing the need for approval, he finds his true strength. By walking away from false connection, he opens himself to what is real. But this path, this returning to naturalness, demands that he walk it mostly alone. In ancient China, during the Warring States period, there lived countless hermit sages who withdrew not from hatred of humanity, but from love of truth. They understood what Lao Tzu meant when he wrote, "When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you." These men weren't running away. They were running toward something more fundamental than social validation, their own uncarved nature, their own Pu, the uncarved block of authentic being that exists before society shapes us into its image. He begins to see this clearly now. Every social gathering operates on unspoken agreements. You validate my story, I'll validate yours. You won't question my comfortable illusions, I won't question yours. You'll pretend my mask is my face, and I'll pretend yours is too. It's an elaborate system of mutual reinforcement, and it works beautifully until someone stops playing, until someone decides that authenticity matters more than acceptance. That's when the system begins to reject him, or perhaps more accurately, that's when he begins to reject the system. People sense the shift before they can name it. They notice he no longer seeks their approval. He doesn't argue with their worldview, but he also doesn't pretend to share it. He listens without the urgency to be heard. He speaks without the need to convince. This creates an unsettling effect. In a world where everyone is performing, the person who stops performing becomes invisible and hypervisible at the same time. Invisible because he no longer plays the expected role. Hypervisible because his stillness stands out against everyone else's noise. The Taoist principle of Wu Wei, often translated as non-doing or effortless action, doesn't mean laziness or passivity. It means acting in harmony with the natural way of things, without force, without struggle against what is. When a man awakens, he begins to embody Wu Wei in his relationships. He stops forcing connection. He stops trying to maintain friendships that require constant performance. He stops pretending enthusiasm for activities that drain his spirit. This isn't withdrawal. This is alignment with truth. And truth, by its nature, cannot be forced. The ancient sages understood something profound about solitude. Confucius said that wisdom isn't the accumulation of knowledge, but the understanding of one single thread binding everything together. That thread is authenticity. First, loyalty to oneself. Then, the extension of that loyalty to others. But notice the order. You cannot genuinely give to others what you haven't first cultivated in yourself. The man who walks alone isn't abandoning others. He's finding himself so that he has something real to offer. Here's what happens in the space between his old life and his new one. Friends stop calling as frequently. Invitations slow down. Social media feels increasingly absurd. Not because he's judging others, but because he can no longer participate in the collective pretending. He sees the performance anxiety underneath every carefully curated post. He recognizes the desperate need for validation in every fishing for compliments update. He understands that most of what people share isn't real life. It's advertising for a life they wish they had. And here's the difficult part. He still cares. He still feels compassion for the people lost in this maze. But caring doesn't mean he can rescue them. The Tao Te Ching teaches, "I have just 3 things to teach: simplicity, patience, compassion. These 3 are your greatest treasures." He's learning patience now. Patience with the process. Patience with others who aren't ready to wake up. Patience with himself as he navigates this lonely terrain between who he was and who he's becoming. Most people fear solitude because they've never truly experienced it. What they call loneliness is actually the discomfort of meeting themselves without distraction. Our modern world offers endless ways to avoid this meeting. Scroll through your phone, binge another series, grab drinks with people you don't really like to avoid an evening alone, fill every silence with noise. But the awakening man has stopped running from silence. He's discovered that what he feared as emptiness is actually fullness. What he avoided as loneliness is actually peace. In his solitude, he begins to hear things he couldn't hear before. Not voices or mystical messages, but the quiet wisdom of his own deepest knowing. He starts to recognize which thoughts are truly his and which are borrowed from the collective conditioning. He distinguishes between the voice of his authentic self and the voice of his socialized self. This discernment is crucial. It's the difference between living his life and living the life others expect of him. The Taoist tradition speaks of sages who know the entire world without going outside. At first, this seems like mystical exaggeration, but he's beginning to understand it differently. When you truly know yourself, when you've faced your own depths without flinching, you've encountered the fundamental patterns that run through all human experience. Your fear is the same fear in your neighbor. Your longing is the same longing that moves through every heart. Your resistance to truth is the same resistance everywhere. By going deeply inward, he's touching what is universal. But here's what no one tells you about awakening. It doesn't make you popular, it makes you peculiar. People who are still asleep prefer the company of other sleepers. It's more comfortable. There's no challenge, no reflection of what they're avoiding. When an awakening man enters a room, he disturbs the equilibrium just by being present. Not because he's trying to, not because he's proclaiming his insights, simply because consciousness cannot help but illuminate unconsciousness. And most people would rather stay in the dark than face what the light reveals. He learns to be okay with this. More than okay. He begins to prefer the honesty of solitude to the performance of false connection. He'd rather spend an evening in his own company, reading ancient wisdom or sitting in silence, than spend it pretending to enjoy small talk about nothing that matters. This preference isn't antisocial, it's pro-authenticity. It's choosing quality over quantity in every aspect of life, including relationships. There's an old Taoist story about a tree so twisted and gnarled that no carpenter would use it for timber. Because it had no use, it was allowed to grow old, providing shade and shelter for countless beings. The tree's uselessness was its salvation. Sometimes the awakening man feels like this tree. Because he won't play the social games, because he won't compete for status or perform for approval, society finds him useless. But this uselessness frees him. He can grow according to his own nature now, without being cut down to fit someone else's purpose. The relationships that do remain in his life undergo a profound transformation, no longer based on habit, obligation, or mutual reinforcement of comfortable lies. They become simpler and deeper. Two people who don't need each other but choose to walk together for a while. No expectation, no demand, no subtle negotiation for power or position, just honest presence. These connections are rare. They can't be manufactured or forced. They emerge naturally when two people have both done the inner work, when both have learned to walk alone. He notices that he's become more honest, not in a brutal, tactless way, but in a fundamental sense. He no longer pretends to agree when he doesn't. He no longer offers false comfort or empty reassurance. When someone asks how he is, he gives a real answer, or he doesn't answer at all. This honesty makes people uncomfortable at first. We're trained to lie in small ways constantly. Fine, thanks. Great to see you. Let's get together soon. He stopped speaking these automatic falsehoods, and the absence of them creates a strange space in conversation. A space where truth could enter, if both people were willing. Ancient Chinese wisdom speaks of the sage who achieves without doing, teaches without speaking. He's beginning to embody this principle. His presence becomes the teaching. His calm amid chaos becomes the instruction. His willingness to stand alone becomes an invitation for others to find their own strength. He doesn't proselytize or try to convince anyone of his path. He simply walks it. And those who have eyes to see will notice. Those who have ears to hear will understand. But make no mistake, this path has a cost. The cost is almost everything he once thought mattered. The approval of others? Gone. The comfort of belonging? Sacrificed. The ease of moving through the world as part of the herd? Forfeited. In exchange, he's gained something most people never find: He's gained himself, his authentic, unconditioned, original self, the self that existed before society told him who to be. The Pu, the uncarved block that is uniquely his. Sometimes late at night, a question surfaces. Am I wrong? Is everyone else right and I'm the one who's lost? This doubt is natural. When you walk against the current, you question whether you're going the right way or everyone else is. The Tao Te Ching addresses this directly. The Tao is forever undefined. Small though it is in the unformed state, it cannot be grasped. If kings and lords could harness it, the 10,000 things would naturally obey. The way is small, easily missed, often doubted. But those who find it know its authenticity by the peace it brings. He's learned to trust that peace, even when loneliness visits, even when he wonders if he'll ever meet someone who truly understands, even when the world seems to be moving in one direction and he's walking the opposite way. The peace underneath tells him he's aligned with something true, something that doesn't need the world's validation because it comes from a deeper source. The Taoist sages practice something called sitting and forgetting, not literally sitting still, though that can be part of it, but forgetting the conditioned self, forgetting the stories you've told yourself about who you are, forgetting the roles you've played, forgetting the identities you've constructed. In that forgetting, something original emerges, something that was always there but covered over by layers of social conditioning. This is what he's doing, not through formal meditation necessarily, but through his willingness to let go of who he thought he had to be. People from his past sometimes resurface, old friends reaching out, former colleagues checking in, and he can feel the distance immediately. Not because he's changed and they haven't, though that's part of it, but because the foundation their relationship stood on no longer exists. They bonded over shared complaints about jobs, over pursuing goals he no longer finds meaningful, over reinforcing each other's limited view of what's possible. Without that foundation, there's nothing to stand on. The conversation feels forced, awkward, like trying to speak a language he's forgotten. He doesn't blame them. He understands. He was there too, not long ago, asleep and convinced he was awake, performing and calling it authenticity, chasing and calling it living. But you can't go back. Once you've seen, you can't unsee. Once you've tasted truth, everything else tastes like cardboard. This is both the blessing and the curse of awakening. The world doesn't change, but your ability to participate in its illusions does. So he walks on, not away from people, but towards something deeper, not running from connection, but refusing to settle for its shallow counterfeit. The ancient sages walked this path before him. Mystics and hermits and spiritual rebels throughout history have walked it. He's not alone in his aloneness. He's part of a lineage of people who chose truth over comfort, authenticity over acceptance, solitude over false belonging. There's a saying in Taoism, nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. He's learning this rhythm now. The world rushes, competes, forces, and strives. He moves at a different pace. The pace of what's natural, the pace that doesn't resist what is. When something is meant to develop, it develops. When someone is meant to enter his life, they enter. When a connection is real, no effort is needed to maintain it. Everything else falls away on its own. This doesn't mean he's passive. Wu Wei is not passivity. It's action without force. It's effort without strain. It's engagement without attachment to outcome. He still acts, still creates, still moves through the world. But he does so from a place of inner stillness rather than outer striving. He does so because the action feels aligned with his nature, not because he's trying to prove something or gain something or become something. The loneliness, when it comes, is no longer frightening. It's just a feeling, like any other. It rises, peaks, and passes. Underneath it is the bedrock of his own presence. He's learned to be his own companion, not in a narcissistic way, but in the way of someone who has faced himself completely and found that he's adequate. Not perfect, not enlightened, but real, and that realness is enough. He thinks about the twisted tree again, useless to the carpenter but vital to the forest. Maybe that's what the awakening man becomes, useless to the machinery of society but vital to the ecology of consciousness. His presence, his example, his willingness to walk alone. These become medicine for others who are beginning to wake up. They see him and think, if he can do it, maybe I can too. They see him at peace in his solitude and realize that solitude isn't the enemy. Pretending is the enemy. Selling out your truth for belonging is the enemy. Solitude is just the space where you meet yourself. In ancient China, the concept of the sage wasn't about perfection. It was about penetrating wisdom and all-embracing benevolence. The sage loves others not by clinging to them or needing them, but by first cultivating himself. Cultivate yourself to bring peace to others, Confucius taught. This is what he's doing in his solitude. Not abandoning the world, but preparing himself to meet it authentically. Not rejecting humanity, but refusing to participate in its unconscious patterns. And here's the unexpected gift. The deeper he goes into his own solitude, the more connected he feels to everything. Not to the social world and its performances, but to the fundamental nature of existence. He feels connected to the trees, to the changing seasons, to the rise and fall of his own breath. He feels connected to other seekers throughout history who walked this lonely path. He feels connected to the source, the Tao, the Wei, the ground of being, whatever name you give to that which cannot be named. This connection doesn't depend on other people acknowledging it. It doesn't depend on being seen or understood. It's not something that can be taken away by social rejection or validated by social acceptance. It's foundational. It's the connection that exists before all other connections, and it remains when all other connections fall away. He's discovered that walking alone doesn't mean walking without purpose. In fact, his purpose has become clearer than ever. Not a purpose given to him by society, not a role he plays for others, but a purpose that emerges from his deepest nature. The Tao Te Ching says, "A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving." This is his purpose now, not to get somewhere or become someone, but to be fully present to what is, to respond authentically to what life presents, to walk his path with integrity even when the path is unmarked and he walks it alone. Sometimes people ask him, "Don't you get lonely?" And he understands now that lonely and alone are not the same thing. Loneliness is the ache for connection you don't have. Aloneness is the peace of your own presence. You can be lonely in a crowd, surrounded by people who don't see you. You can be at peace in solitude, completely yourself. He's learned to prefer the latter. The social world continues without him, mostly. It doesn't need him to keep turning. People find others to validate their stories, to share their complaints, to participate in the collective performance. The world has no shortage of actors. What it lacks are authentic beings. What it needs are people willing to stop pretending. And he's become one of those people, even if it means walking alone. There's a strange freedom in no longer being controlled by the need for approval. He can speak the truth as he sees it without calculating how it will be received. He can make choices based on what feels right, rather than what looks good. He can disappoint people without drowning in guilt. He can say no without over-explaining. This freedom is worth the price of admission, worth the loneliness, worth the misunderstanding, worth the distance from the crowd. The ancient Taoist masters spoke of fasting of the mind, not depriving the mind of thought, but emptying it of unnecessary accumulation. All the borrowed beliefs, all the second-hand opinions, all the social conditioning that passes for personal conviction. He's been doing this fast, though he didn't know to call it that, clearing out what isn't his, making space for what is. And in that space, his true nature is revealing itself, slowly, quietly, without fanfare. He's noticed something interesting. The less he needs from others, the more he has to offer them. When he's not looking for validation, he can listen without agenda. When he's not seeking approval, he can be honest without cruelty. When he's not dependent on connection, he can connect without clinging. This is the paradox the sages understood. You have to be able to walk alone before you can truly walk with others. But the truth is, most people aren't ready for that kind of meeting. They're still caught in the web of mutual reinforcement, still performing, still protecting their carefully constructed image. And that's okay. Everyone's on their own timeline. Some will wake up, some won't. It's not his job to force anyone's eyes open. The most he can do is remain true to his own path and trust that his authenticity might inspire someone else to find theirs. The Tao Te Ching teaches that the sage desires no desire. This used to sound like deprivation to him. Now he understands it differently. It's not about having no desires. It's about not being enslaved by them, not needing things to be different than they are, not demanding that people change to make you comfortable, not requiring the world to validate your choices. This inner freedom allows him to engage with life fully without being attached to specific outcomes. He moves through his days differently now. There's less rushing, less forcing, less striving, more presence, more patience, more allowance. Things unfold in their own time, and he trusts that timing. Opportunities arise naturally. Connections form without effort. His life simplifies because he's not trying to maintain so many pretenses. The complexity falls away. and what remains is essential. People who knew him before sometimes comment, "You've changed," and he has, but not in the way they mean. He hasn't become someone new. He's become more himself. He stripped away the layers of conditioning to reveal what was always underneath. In that sense, he hasn't changed at all. He's returned to his original nature, his uncarved state, his authentic self. This return is what the sages meant by following the Tao, not adopting a belief system or joining a tradition, simply returning to what's natural, what's true, what's real. And what's real, it turns out, often requires you to walk alone. Because most people are walking paths laid out by others, following maps drawn by the collective, pursuing destinations chosen by society. The path of authenticity has no map, no guidebook, no crowd to follow, just you and your inner knowing and the willingness to trust it. He's made peace with the cost. Some days are harder than others. Some nights the silence feels heavy. Some moments he wishes for someone who understands, someone who sees what he sees, someone who walks the same pathless path. But wishing doesn't make it so. And waiting for perfect understanding before moving forward means never moving forward. So he walks, alone when necessary, accompanied when possible, but always authentic. The world will continue to sleep. That's not his concern. The masses will continue to perform. That's not his responsibility. People will judge him, misunderstand him, write him off. That's not his problem. His only job is to remain true to what he knows, to walk his path with integrity, to honor the awakening that's happened in him even when the world doesn't honor it. There's a line from the Tao Te Ching that returns to him often. When the great Tao is forgotten, kindness and morality arise. When wisdom and intelligence are born, the great pretense begins. He sees this everywhere now. The moral posturing on social media, the performance of kindness without genuine compassion, the display of intelligence without actual wisdom. The great pretense is everywhere, and he can no longer participate in it. Not because he's better than others, but because he's seen through it. So yes, he walks alone. Not by choice exactly, but by consequence. The consequence of waking up in a sleeping world. The consequence of choosing authenticity in a culture of performance. The consequence of honoring his truth when truth isn't popular. But here's what he's discovered. Walking alone is infinitely better than walking with others while betraying yourself. The loneliness of solitude is nothing compared to the loneliness of pretending to belong. And who knows, maybe somewhere, someone else is walking their own lonely path. Maybe somewhere, another person has chosen truth over comfort. Maybe the paths will cross one day, and there will be a moment of recognition. Two people who walk alone, meeting briefly, acknowledging each other without need or demand. That possibility exists. But even if it doesn't, even if he walks alone until the end, it's still the right path, because it's his path, and that's enough. The ancient sages who walked before him understood something profound. They understood that the greatest freedom comes not from acquiring more or connecting more or achieving more, but from needing less approval, less validation, less company, less noise. In that needing less, you become more yourself, more authentic, more whole, more free. This is what a chosen man always walks alone really means. Not that he's special or superior, not that he's been selected by some cosmic force, but that he's chosen himself, chosen his own truth over collective illusion, chosen authenticity over acceptance, chosen the lonely path of waking up over the comfortable slumber of fitting in. And once that choice is made, truly made, there's no going back. He doesn't regret it, even on the hard days, even when the silence is deafening, even when he wonders if anyone will ever truly understand. Because underneath all of that is something unshakable, a knowing, a peace, a rightness that doesn't depend on external validation. He's aligned with something deeper than social approval. He's aligned with the Tao, the way, the truth of his own being. And that alignment, that inner harmony, is worth every moment of outer solitude. So he continues, one step at a time, no rush, no force, just steady presence. He watches the world chase what he's released. He sees people struggle for what he's surrendered. He understands now that most of what people call living is actually a kind of dying. Dying to yourself little by little to fit in. Dying to your truth to be accepted. Dying to your nature to be normal. He's chosen life instead. Real life. Authentic life. Even if authentic life is lonelier than the comfortable death of conformity. The path ahead is unclear. That's the nature of walking without a map. But he's learned to be okay with uncertainty, to be comfortable not knowing what comes next, to trust that each step will reveal itself when it's time to take it. This is Wu Wei in action, moving with what is rather than against it, flowing rather than forcing, being rather than becoming. And in this being, in this allowing, in this radical acceptance of his own path, he finds something unexpected: joy. Not the manufactured happiness of getting what you want, but the deep joy of being who you are, the joy of authenticity, the joy of inner freedom, the joy of walking alone without loneliness, because you finally found the best company there is, yourself, unmasked and real. This is the message he would offer to anyone beginning to wake up, anyone starting to feel the distance between themselves and the sleeping world. The loneliness is real. The path is difficult. The cost is high. But the alternative, pretending to be someone you're not for the comfort of belonging, costs infinitely more. It costs your soul, your truth, your life. So if you're beginning to walk alone, know that you're not crazy. You're awake. And awakeness, in a sleeping world, always feels lonely at first. But there's a deeper connection waiting. Connection to yourself. Connection to truth. Connection to the eternal Tao that flows through everything. That connection doesn't require anyone else's participation. It's already there, waiting for you to stop looking outside and turn within. The sages who walked this path before you left markers. Not obvious signs, but subtle teachings. Ancient texts that speak across millennia to the part of you that knows. Stories of hermits and mystics who chose truth over comfort. Wisdom that reminds you, you're not the first to walk alone, and you won't be the last. There's a lineage here. An invisible community of authentic beings stretching back through time. You're part of that lineage now. Walk with integrity, walk with presence, walk with trust that your path, however lonely, is exactly the path you need. The world doesn't need more people performing. It needs more people awakening, more people choosing truth, more people willing to walk alone rather than compromise their authentic nature. Be one of those people. The loneliness is temporary. The authenticity is eternal. And maybe, just maybe, your willingness to walk alone will give someone else the courage to do the same. Maybe your quiet example will speak louder than any teaching. Maybe the simple fact that you chose truth will remind someone else that truth is a choice they can make too. This is how consciousness spreads. Not through conversion or convincing, but through example, through living so authentically that others remember what authenticity feels like. The Tao Te Ching reminds us, the way is forever undefined. Small though it is in the unformed state, it cannot be grasped. Your path is like this, undefined, small, impossible to grasp with the mind, but walk it anyway, trust it anyway, even when no one else understands, especially when no one else understands. Because the path that everyone understands is the path of conformity. The path that few comprehend is the path of truth. So here's to walking alone, not in bitterness or superiority, but in quiet dignity, not running from the world, but refusing to betray yourself for it. Not hating people, but honoring truth more than temporary belonging. Here's to the lonely path of authenticity, walked by every sage and mystic and spiritual rebel who ever chose to wake up. Here's to you, whoever you are, reading these words and recognizing yourself in them. You're not alone in your aloneness. And the path, though solitary, leads home. Home to yourself. And that's the only home that truly matters. Have you felt this? Do you recognize this path? Share your experience if this resonates. Tell me if you're walking alone too. Because while we may walk our paths in solitude, there's something powerful in knowing others are walking theirs. Different paths, same commitment to truth, same willingness to be authentic even when it costs everything. The ancient wisdom isn't asking you to abandon all connection. It's asking you to abandon false connection. It's not telling you to hate people. It's telling you to love truth more. It's not demanding isolation. It's offering liberation. Liberation from the exhausting performance. Liberation from the constant need for approval. Liberation into the radical freedom of being exactly who you are. Try this for the next 7 days. Notice when you're performing versus when you're authentic. Notice when you say yes but mean no. Notice when you pretend agreement to keep the peace. Notice every small betrayal of your truth. You don't have to change anything yet. Just notice. Awareness is the first step. The rest will follow in its own time, in its own way, according to the natural unfolding that the Taoists called Wu Wei. And return here in 7 days. Share what you discovered. Share what you noticed. Share what shifted. Because while we walk alone, we're not alone in walking. There are others on this path. Others who've chosen truth. Others who understand the cost and pay it anyway. Find each other. Recognize each other. And know that the loneliness is just the space between the false self dying and the true self emerging. The chosen man walks alone, but he walks with purpose. He walks with presence. He walks with a peace that the sleeping world cannot understand and cannot take away. This is his path. This is your path if you choose it. Not easy, not popular, not comfortable, but real. And in a world drowning in pretense, realness is the rarest treasure of all. So walk on, friend. Walk on with courage. Walk on with trust. The path reveals itself one step at a time. The Tao unfolds naturally. And somewhere, in the solitude you've been taught to fear, you'll find what you've been seeking all along. Not in another person, not in the world's approval, but in yourself, finally met, finally known, finally honored. That meeting is worth the lonely journey. That knowing is worth the cost. That honor is worth everything you release to find it. Are you ready to walk? The path awaits. Not out there in the world, but within. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, Lao Tzu taught us. Take that step, then take another, and trust that the path of authenticity, however solitary, leads to the only destination that matters, home to yourself, whole and true, and finally, after all the pretending, free.